you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Things are going great. It's been a fun couple of days, hasn't it? Here we go. Here we go. Let me see what the folks are saying. Ben, good morning to all who do Bitcoin. Indeed. We love all the people who do Bitcoin. Let's go right down here. There we go. Robert, you're not first today. Sorry, man. We got Ben there first on my screen anyway. I'm not sure. Bon matin, Sixto, McReady, Greg, good morning. A little chilly in Florida, but the sun is up, coffee is hot, and Bitcoin is running. There you go. Good morning, children of the coin. I like that, Tommy. That's great. Good morning, all. Good morning, all. I started getting a message from YouTube tonight that ad blockers are not allowed. I use the Brave browser, but short their shitcoin. Nice, Robert. Very fun. They announced their browser at my show in 2017, maybe. They've been around for a while. Amazing. They were our official Wi-Fi sponsor. So I always have a fond memory of them. Good morning to the count and the Bitcoiners of the world. Indeed. Thank you, Bitcoin Deb. Thank you. I appreciate it. Good morning. Twitter was fun yesterday. Sure was, Robert. Good morning, Breakup Team. Hoddle T. Washington. Good morning, Breakup Bitcoiners. Tommy. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Indeed. Good morning. Learned about Blockstream satellites yesterday. Good to know in case there's total chaos. Yeah, if you want to go back in time and see, I think they kept that video up, but there is a CNBC video of me with Joe Kernan and Andrew Ross Sorkin, so the Squawk Box folks. And they gave me that line, what are you going to do if the power goes out, if there's a nuclear bomb in the atmosphere and there's some kind of thing? And I was like, don't worry, we put it in satellites, we got shortwave radio, we're fine. So they were blown away. It made a headline. They cut it into a video. So I think it's one of the ones that's still out on the internet. You can see that. I have a company Christmas party Friday night. I promise to be effed up until Saturday morning. No problem, Robert. There you go. All right, team. Let's just acknowledge that, as we've heard in the comments, right? The sun is up. Sunrise Tech on point. Bitcoin running without problem. So the money tech is running. We're doing good on the money and the time tech. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Assalamu alaikum, Bitcoiners. How you doing, Muslim Bitcoiner? Jebby, good morning indeed. Here, you're all here. I know what you're here for. You want to hear the fake news. What's the fake news today? We got some good ones. Well, this is from Canada, right? So you always know if I'm starting with a fake news from Canada that it's going to be top quality, right? I don't bring in shitty Canadian submissions to Moscow time. When I do Moscow time from Canada, it's primo, right? So here's what we got. Canada, first person, his name is Daryl Wetter. Wetter? I don't know. I got a vasectomy due to climate grief. It's not climate change anymore, guys. It's climate grief. Perfect. Greta approves, I think. She's got climate grief, right? It's not climate change, guys. It's climate grief. So this poor fella got a vasectomy due to climate grief. Now I'm compelled to let go of my backup plan. I'm not sure I would have volunteered for the snip without the option to freeze my sperm. I don't know if he's coming or going, but whatever. Poor fella's from Nova Scotia. So if you didn't know this about Canada, there's dumb people throughout the realm, but there's a concentration of them on the East Coast. All right, just so you know. All right, there's a few more over there. So poor Daryl. My then partner called out from a few rows back on a crowded flight. We'd originally been seated together, but I'd relocated so a mom could sit with her kids. When I looked back over the packed seats amidst the roar of burning engines, she smiled at me and mimed a scissor cut with 2 fingers. Yes, she finally said in a gesture. Understandable only to me. So he goes on, poor fella. He's a planet worrier, he calls it. A planet worrier since my early teens. Climate grief, planet worrier. Yeah. I told each successive romantic partner that I wanted to love, but not children. Well, Daryl, You'll be happy to know that there's some good news, but we'll get to that later. But we're going to keep on the theme here of climate change, right? Because it's the COPE. Remember the COPE people? The COPE, right? They actually call it COPE. I don't know why they would call a climate summit COPE, but they call it COPE, right? So here's what we know. Scientists say that capturing huge amounts of carbon is essential to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. This is from Bloomberg Business. But time is running out for technologies to catch up to the challenge. CNN lets us know that how the climate crisis fuels gender inequality, guys. Okay, gender inequality, big thing. This one's really great. Okay, this comes from Bloomberg again. What is this? South Park does the Nova Scotia people perfectly. They have square mushroom heads instead of eggs. Something's wrong with these people. So here's Bloomberg. How scientists link climate change to worse heat waves, droughts, and wildfire floods. So they actually give their methodology in this article, right? So I read it. I was wondering, how do they come up with this stuff, right? How all of a sudden is weather and climate exactly the same thing? Because for many years we were told they were not the same thing. But the science that enables researchers to do just that has advanced over the past 20 years to the point where individual heat spells, storms, floods, droughts, and wildfires are now routinely tied to global warming. So what's their message? What's their method? Well, they tell us. So what they do is first, researchers classify whether a weather event was extreme by putting in the context. We heard all about the context yesterday from the universities and the science people. So this is another one of those beautiful cases where our theme fits our Moscow time. So remember this context thing, right? So by putting it in the context of observations of the same type of event in the same area, ideally over a long period of history. Weather can be capricious. So just because an event is extreme doesn't mean humanity's greenhouse gas pollution played a role. A possible connection is assessed by using computer models. Guys, the computer said. It's in the computer. It's in the computer to create two virtual worlds. So what they do is it's the same scam, right? They just take a model of a predictive computer model and they say, okay, this one, we're going to plug in all the data about the temperatures and the changes and the extreme weather or whatever the weather is. And this one, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put all the data, but we're not going to include the data of like who farted in China last year, right? So then they put all this data in, and then one comes up with an answer that says, oh, look, extreme event and people were farting. Oh, shit, they're connected. And the other one says, extreme event, no one farted. We don't see the connection. So they actually just do that, right? They just take some data away from one equation, and then they say, oh, whoa, they're connected. It probably works every time. There's probably nothing they can put into their fake data machine that would produce any other result than they're expecting, because it's what they're saying, right? They say one of them built on so-called counterfactual world is built by keeping carbon concentrations constant at a level in the past. So they literally just limit the amount of farts that they've registered, right? So it's a fart registration omission. That's what they're saying, right? They call it the counterfactual world. So it is that. It's like, okay, imagine if there was weather and there were no cars and no farts for a whole year, would it still be the weather? And then they'll go, no, no, the computer says no. So there you go. It gets great. It gets even better, right? So they keep the counterfactual world built by keeping carbon concentrations constant at a level in the past before people began burning fossil fuels. And the other, actual concentrations are plugged in. The researchers compare the weather event in the two scenarios. They actually do. They're coming out and saying this is their scientific method. Good for them. Way to go, guys. Way to go. All right. So now that's the context, right, of today's show. It is the context, literally the context. So if you didn't see the university presidents 2 days ago, we mentioned it yesterday, but the three presidents, UPenn, Harvard, and MIT, were all hauled in front of Congress to see if they could explain what genocide was, right? And if calling for the extermination of Jewish people was or was not genocide, they had a lot of problems. It was like asking them, what is a woman? They simply could not answer the question, right? And it looked really pathetic. And it gets even worse because Liz McGill, I guess is her name, she's the president of UPenn, gave another speech yesterday because everyone has been talking about how terrible they did in front of Congress. Bill Ackman, for example, saying, shut them down. These people are out of their minds. What the hell? Why can't they answer the most basic question? So Liz McGill comes in front of the public yesterday and makes what looks like a hostage video. Remember, I always talk about Jerome Powell doing hostage videos, right? Like, the US dollar has nothing to worry about as long as America remains the place with the rule of law and a rules-based approach. Don't look at the president candidate getting arrested. Don't look at the suppression of freedom of speech. Don't look at any of that, right? So it looks exactly like a hostage situation. So she comes out and makes this video and makes it worse. She looks ridiculous. She's doing the Letitia James thing where she looks illiterate, because when she's doing her video messages, she's got to look at her script. So her eyes are always off from where the camera should be. And she's always like looking in some weird direction. So Letitia, she looks illiterate. Well, she's reading, so I don't know if she looks illiterate, but she looks like she's struggling to read an address, and the eyes being positioned in the wrong place makes her look even less credible. So that's the New York AG. But the president of UPenn looked as stupid. Imagine, she looked as stupid as the New York Attorney General. That's hard to do, right? She did it. She did it. She looked absolutely illiterate. So she comes up and tries to read this thing. Now, Tyler Cowen, if you don't know him, he's a big VC, and would be part of this like Bill Ackman group of people who were super liberal in 2016. If you disagreed with whatever, you were a racist too. They're on that gang for a long time. But after hearing the stuff that's happened after October 7th and hearing what's going on campuses, these guys are changing their tune and quick. So they're asking for all these people to be fired and all that stuff. So Tyler Cowen ends up making a post, right? He posts on Marginal Revolution. And so here's what he's saying about what happened with these university presidents. He goes, I don't doubt that I would find their actual views on world affairs highly objectionable. But that is not why I'm here today. Here are a few points. Their entire testimony, so he's talking about the presidents of the universities, their entire testimony is ruled by their lawyers, by their fear that their universities might be sued, and their need to placate internal interest groups. That is a major problem. In addition to their unwillingness to condemn various forms of rhetoric for violating codes of conduct. So someone was sending around the version of Mein Kampf, the Hitler book by Harvard University Press, published by them, but they changed Mein Kampf to Mein Context. So the thing is, the presidents are right. It's always about context, right? Of course, it's always about context, but not in the ones that they were having hypothetically to discuss in front of Congress 2 days ago, right? Like calling for the genocide of any group of people. Obviously, there's no context where that's okay. Right? They couldn't answer the question. They literally could not answer the question, which makes it funny, right? So here he goes on. How do we think this affects the quality of their other decisions, the perceptions and incentives of their subordinates? So he goes on. They are all in a defensive crouch. None of them are good on TV. None of them are good in front of Congress. They have ended up disgracing their universities in front of massive audiences, the largest they will ever have, simply for the end goal of maintaining a kind of illusory maximum defensibility of their positions within their university. And at that, they are too skilled. How do you think that affects the quality of their other decisions, their perceptions, their incentives of their subordinates? What do you think about the mechanisms that lead these particular individuals to be selected for top leadership positions? So he goes on here, number 3, not one came close to admitting how hypocritical private university policies are on free speech. You can call for intifada, but cannot express various opinions about trans individuals, not de facto. Whether you think they should or should not, none of the universities come close to enforcing First Amendment standards for speech, even off campus in their facilities and their subordinates and things like that. So he goes on again and asks the same questions. What do you think that says about the quality and forthrightness about other decisions, of the subsequent perceptions and incentives of their subordinates? What do you think about the mechanisms that led to this particular equilibrium to evolve? Overall, this was a dark day for American higher education. I want you to keep in mind that the incentives you saw on display rule so many other parts of the system, albeit usually invisibly. Don't forget that. These university presidents have solved for what they think is the equilibrium, and it ain't pretty. Now, that's everything you need to know right there, right? It's the incentives, it's the subtle forms of brainwashing that come with root key access to people's brains by manipulating the collective subconscious, right? So I talk about this in my book, The Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management, right? So I make a point a few times about money and its ability to have created this sort of hypnotic state for people, right? So here's where I put the, let me see when I had this pretty good quote, I think, about what's going on here. Anyway, it's about this root key access thing, right? And how powerful it is. Here's what I say. In the labyrinthine realm of consciousness and societal constructs, no theater of operation is more convoluted, more ripe with grand-scale enchantments than the arena of U.S. politics. The word fiat means to dictate, declare, to state with words. NPCs still live in the hypnotic state of words, where the words of the state are in fact money, with root key access to their subconscious minds. U.S. politics are the battlefield of USD reality. And why we like to say the affirmation, it's not you, it's USD, right? So I got something in my throat here. I'm just going to shut the mic off and clear it. 1 second. That should be better. So that's what we know about these incentives, and here's what Russ Roberts says a little bit about this situation. He says both McGill and Gay. Isn't it funny that the president of Harvard is President Gay? President Gay? What? Okay. President Gay walked back what they said under oath. Maybe MIT Prez also. What is going on? They're all clearly coached by legal advisors that they were both under oath and to say nothing like yes. But what is the point of recanting a day later? I cannot believe they have been surprised by the backlash. Must be some legal technicality. Either way, this is more comically unreassuring after the testimony before Congress. I don't know about comically unreassuring, but here's what it does, right? Here's the beautiful thing about what happened. We're getting into conversations about incentives. We're getting into ideas around where the type of brainwashing that we're dealing with comes from. What are the means? What are the tools? How does it function? Where does it sit, right? And it's what Bitcoiners have been saying for a long time. You don't need a large conspiracy theory involving Illuminati and all these other people to explain what is going on in front of us. What is going on in front of us is that a reality was created years ago with the US dollar, and incentives were set up, and people's right and wrong and worldviews were all aligned to it. But because the system itself is broken, because the money itself doesn't function, the entire set of logic around it, right and wrong, is also broken. And so you can explain everything you see in front of you, everything that's going on in America and the world. You can explain it all with incompetence and greed. Those two elements will actually explain everything you need to know. Greedy, incompetent people are just trying to survive. Liz McGill and President Gay, they're just trying to make their way in a world that actually doesn't make sense anymore. The system to them makes sense because they're inside of it. They can't see outside the walls. They can't see what's going on, right? But you saw with these dinks, everyone talking about the dinks, right? The couple. It's not so much that they're dinks. It's not that. That's not what has struck most people. It's how brain damaged and stupid they sound, right? Thinking that the things they like are awesome, right? Like waking up late and drinking a bunch of coffee and traveling. All right, well, I do all of well, I don't wake up late, but I drink a lot of coffee, and I don't really think about how much it costs. And I also travel probably more than them, am with my kids, with my family, and all that stuff. So obviously, what they're talking about is mental handicap. It's brain damage. For them to understand and cope like the people in the global warming thing, to cope with the reality, they've had to come up with this situation where they have some advantage, right? It's better for them to live like this. So we can see the brain damage working through the system, and it's powerful, right? But the spell of this brain damage and the ability to inflict more brain damage on people is being lost very quickly. And the reasons for it are becoming obvious. The brainwashing capacity of the people isn't as ubiquitous, and it must be ubiquitous. I've talked about this many times. The advantage that Bitcoin has, that we can peck off one individual at a time in order to move the sticks forward and advance the effort. Whereas the illusory hallucinatory system based on the US dollar can't have cracks. It has to be 100%, basically, right? The fault tolerance of it is very, very low. It can't handle, like Bitcoin's fault tolerance is 51%, right? So as long as 51% of nodes exist in a harmonious sort of reality, competing in the same game to tell the truth about what they saw and which transactions they saw and what's going on. I'm talking about the point of view of a node, right? The worldview of a Bitcoin node. In order for that to perpetuate, there is and we all know it's a 51% attack. There's a fault tolerance level that Bitcoin has for lies and scams and cheaters and all that stuff. And it's very clear. It's a 51% attack, right? So that's what we understand as the fault tolerance. Fault tolerance being the expression used by cryptographers, right, in these distributed systems. So in the early days of blockchains, for example, and to this day, you still see people experimenting with different fault tolerance levels, right? You've heard about Byzantine fault tolerance. That's 66%, right? It's one third it can assume a fault tolerance. The reason why it's higher, right, than Bitcoin, which is 51%, right? The reason why it's higher is because you're dealing with fewer nodes. So it's the attack surface is limited, so you don't need to lie as much, and you do have to have more people synced in order to have credibility. So in a lot of these Byzantine fault tolerance systems, like Ripple uses this, right? Not for I don't know how XRP works, but I remember how the original Ripple works. And it's a 2/3 consensus mechanism, right? So Bitcoin at the very beginning was one of the first ever of these consensus mechanisms to be operational. So no one really knew at the time which was the best optimized level. It's become clear that the 51% widely open distributed system, maximum amount of nodes, is the best way, right? That's probably the best we can do from an engineering point of view, and it looks sufficient, right? So now the problem with the flip side of the US dollar, and it's the problem of any pyramid scheme, that if you don't have it constructed with that 100% control over reality, the fault tolerance of the US dollar is very high, right? It's like 90%, I think. If 10% of countries and banks were to leave the system, it would collapse very quickly, I think. So the good news for us is that we're getting a scenario put in place now where it's starting to become that. Their ability to keep the fault tolerance at its level of acceptability of how much faults it can tolerate is already being reached. And we saw a little bit of it yesterday. We had, this JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, right? Jamie Dimon comes on TV yesterday. Now he's in front of Congress, right? And he's there with Elizabeth Warren, who's on her major crusade to make sure that the sandwich makers, I'm not kidding, this is what her thing is right now, right? Elizabeth Warren is on a crusade to stop a merger between Subway sandwiches and another large sandwich maker, because she's actually going with this point of view that there's going to be a monopoly on sandwiches in America. A monopoly on sandwiches in America. So she's arguing that if Subway and another company, I don't know who, become one company, that Americans will be subject to extortionary practices from sandwich makers. I'm not kidding. This is actually happening, right? So this super credible person is running some bullshit yesterday where Jamie Dimon has to go testify to the sandwich queen of America. And so the sandwich queen and Jamie Dimon are talking. Yeah, I don't know what McAllister is. Jimmy John's, Subway, McAllister. Yeah, so CB, I don't know anything. I don't eat these shitty sandwiches, so I don't know anything about it, right? Jimmy John's, I don't even eat sandwich unless basically I make them myself, right? My wife bakes a lot of bread. I wouldn't eat American bread; it's tainted. So I wouldn't even eat the good stuff that people say is real bread and all that. Like when I'm in America, even across the border in Vermont, like, and I'm, not a mile from the border. If I don't bring bread from Quebec, I'm going to buy flour from the little organic King Arthur flour market in Vermont, and I'm baking my own bread because I'm not touching glyphosate, whatever that shit's called. I'm not going near the shitty tainted flour they sell in America, right? At least in Quebec and parts of Vermont, I can get good flour and we can bake our own bread. Yeah, I'm not, hold your keys, fix your own sandwich. Yes, exactly, Felipe. You can't make this shit up. So the sandwich queen of America, Elizabeth, some people call her Pocahontas Warren, try to fight for your right. I even had a draft fake news. Let me see if I can find it. I took a picture of an excellent Moscow time that didn't make the cut. But it was about her sandwich stuff. It was pretty good. I'm not sure if I'll be able to find it though. I'm not gonna look. Oh yeah, here it is. Guess who wrote it? George Will. So George Will is another fake Mockingbird asset. He was a big baseball fan. So when I was a little boy, I loved this writer, George Will, and because he used to go on Ken Burns movies about baseball, the documentaries that he made about baseball, and he sounded intelligent, and as a young more libertarian-minded person, he sounded sort of like a credible news writer back in those days. Well, he had such bad Trump derangement syndrome that I outed what he really was, which is a Mockingbird asset. So now, because he got everything so wrong, and he's now like kind of old, and I don't know how his brain is doing. He must get just the shittiest assignments from the Washington Post, right? So he wrote this, right? This is an actual piece from someone who so you got to understand this. There was a time in America where George Will would have been recognized as like the top 5 columnists in the country. There was a time where he was in the top 5 recognizable names. If George Will wrote something, people would talk about it, right? He was at that level. So this is what he wrote yesterday. Elizabeth Warren applauds the Federal Trade Commission as it investigates the proposed sale of Subway on possible anti-monopoly grounds. Yeah, so people are remembering. I recall trusting that blowbag. Yeah, me too. I mean, it was the baseball thing, right? Even Ken Burns. Ken Burns is done. Like, he had such bad Trump derangement syndrome that I can't watch another Ken Burns movie. Like, I can't respect this guy. There's no way, right? And he made great movies. He made great movies. So there you go. So what happened yesterday is Elizabeth Warren has Jamie Dimon there. And what does Jamie Dimon say? Of course, the predictable thing, right? I've always been deeply opposed to crypto, Bitcoin, etc. And then he gave the line, if I were the government, I'd close it down, right? Because and he went on with the use case criminal thing, right? So Jamie Dimon you got to admit, he's pretty funny, right? To come in front of people and do this. It's pretty funny, like to have the gall and the audacity, to have the flagrant, the balls to say this, right? Because what we know at the same time is that JP Morgan has been involved in so many fines. This is from Alexandra Schachtel, saying they've been convicted of 272 crimes since 2000. That's once a month for 23 years in a row. The total fines are about $40 billion, among which $2 billion specifically on money laundering, notably the connection to Bernie Madoff's, Madoff's Ponzi. So they were caught up in Bernie Madoff's Ponzi, and we're supposed to trust these people. And this is the more damning one, though. Marty Bent brings this up, and this is something that we have covered closely on the breakup. So we have a bit of an advantage here. So here's what Marty Bent says. Projection, right? How often do we talk about projection here on the show? All the time. Projection, understanding projection psychologically is one of the best tools you can have to understand what's going on in the news. Almost everything in the news is projection, weirdly, right? Like, I used to think it was a joke. This was something Tucker Carlson used to go on about and still does. But I thought it was like cute when he first said it. I was like, oh, Tucker, what a funny coincidence. You know, it's true what he's saying. But the more you see it, the more you realize that this is actually what's happening. Projection is the actual lens you need to understand most accusations, most cope is projection, right? So here's what we know. He says projection. Well, let me read the whole thing, right? So the quote that Marty Bent uses here is, this is, I've always been deeply opposed. You heard that one. The true use case for it is criminals because it is somewhat anonymous and you can move money instantaneously. If I was the government, I'd close it down, he says, right? So Marty Bent says, projection. Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan helped facilitate Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking enterprise for 15 years. The people trying to besmirch Bitcoiners as criminals are the worst criminals that exist today. The system is so corrupt they could get away with it for $75 million. And he brings the quote here. JP Morgan Chase has received $75 million settlement with the U.S. Virgin Islands over a lawsuit accusing the nation's largest bank of facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking enterprise for 15 years, according to statements released by the bank and territory. Okay, so now we know that. Now, you can go on. No one even in America knows who the fuck Jamie Dimon is. So it's not like you're going to be able to say, hey, cousin, they called us the criminals, but look what JP Morgan did. Epstein, this, that, right? Kind of complicated, right? Kind of complicated. But the simulation, being a beautiful bastard, has delivered to us a funny coincidence. It's just a coincidence, right? It's just a coincidence, but it's real funny. And here's the one, right? So yesterday, at the same time, Joe Biden, remember what we've said for a long time, that it's just the best that Joe Biden is president with his current capacity and skills and rhetorical ability in his brain. All of that is perfect for Bitcoiners because watching him do the job is enough to let you know what's really going on because he's so incompetent, right? So it's like one of these things. I've been comparing it to Craig Wright for a long time. You know, Craig Wright, oh, I'm Satoshi. And then you got to live with it, right? You got to live with all of the lies, all of the accusations. And you can see, right, that of all the people in Bitcoin who have had their brain broken in the last 10 years, I can't think of someone more destroyed than Craig Wright. Just watching him try. Remember last time his excuse was, I was drunk when I did that. I'm always drunk. I'm fucked up and all this shit. Everyone I know is a forger. like, and I think he believes it, right? I think his mind is so twisted and warped. It's not about right or wrong. It's just about watching someone who has a type of mental retardation that comes from brain damage from lying so much. And watching Biden, the Craig Wright of presidents, do his job is one of the most amazing and beautiful things Bitcoiners can ever ask for. It's perfect. It's way more convincing than pointing out that Jamie Dimon is a criminal and JP Morgan did this, because they're actually connected, right? So if you remember last year, the one of the worst liars you'll ever find, Joe Biden, takes an impromptu Christmas trip. You remember this? Remember we were talking about all this? This all really happened, right? I told this to a bunch of broken brain Toronto liberals yesterday, and not only were they shocked, it actually landed, right? It actually landed. Now they're Jewish, so their minds are a little more open these days to this kind of stuff, right? But these are Trump derangement syndrome people, right? Big time. So I said, well, you know what happened last Christmas? Remember this, right? Remember what happened. Joe Biden last Christmas, not his son, not his brother, not the attorney general, not the secretary of state, not Blinken, nobody like that. Out of nowhere last year, President Joe Biden announces he's taking a Christmas trip to the U.S. Virgin Islands. And what happens when he arrives is he meets with the governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands, because the attorney general, a black woman, not that that's important, but you gotta remember who's being censored here in the battle of races and intersectionality. He goes down, Joe Biden, a white guy, goes down to the Virgin Islands and gets the attorney general fired. The attorney general of the U.S. Virgin Islands was fired during his trip because she brought the case against JP Morgan, which couldn't be stopped in the end, right? So they fired her. just a coincidence that Biden went down at the same time. They fire her, but the case still goes forward. And instead of doing all the discovery, JP Morgan just pays the fine. So all we know publicly about the Joe Biden trip to U.S. Virgin Islands last Christmas was that the AG got fired and that everything got swept under the rug with a settlement for the $75 million that Marty Bent is mentioning here. Now, at the same time yesterday, Joe Biden gets questioned, right? So forget everything about the U.S. Virgin Islands for a second, right? So he's up there trying to give a speech and a question gets through. Normally he doesn't take questions, right? So he's got the blankest stare you've ever seen, right? Just like can't even understand what's happening. And he looks like his heart is breaking a little bit too, right? Because he kind of gets it, right? He's now got to lie in front of everyone. And he goes with, it's a bunch of lies, right? And it was just like, did you meet with Hunter and the people in the business and all that? It's a bunch of lies. So now we've gone from, now remember, right? A few weeks ago, it was Biden never talked to Hunter and his partners. Then he did talk to them, but not about business. And then he did talk to them about business, but he didn't get paid, right? So that's what it was. It was, I didn't meet them. Oh, no, I did. Oh, I met them, but we didn't talk business. Oh, I did talk business, but I didn't get paid. But now we're back at I didn't meet them. Now we're back at I didn't meet them, right? So he's going with I didn't meet them. In one of the most pathetic denials you'll ever see. Everything about it is the least credible denial you've ever seen in your life. In your life, right? You literally can't act more guilty than he acted, right? It's lies. It's a bunch of lies. They're lies, right? But everyone knows they met. Now, the system is so corrupted. There's not necessarily going to be questions about any of this. But just imagine the luck, right? That Jamie Dimon goes and testifies to the least credible person, the sandwich king of America, Pocahontas, some people call her, right? So she's the questioner. And then in the backdrop is Biden becoming the Craig Wright of presidents. It's perfect. It's perfect. There's nothing credible about any of these people, right? So that's the good news. This subtle brainwashing, right? They've called it MK Ultra before. Now, MK Ultra, if you didn't know what MK Ultra was, right? It's starting to get in the news a lot more. Elon Musk mentioned it the other day. Roseanne Barr yelled at Elon Musk or tweeted Elon Musk, stop stealing my bit, because Roseanne Barr was on the Bill Maher podcast a couple of days ago. And it turns out Bill Maher had never even heard of MK Ultra. Is it credible? I don't know, but maybe. I think there is an information access problem with a lot of these broken brain liberals. So she tries to tell him what MK Ultra is. Now Elon is talking about MK Ultra. MK Ultra being the original brainwashing experiment system to understand how to reprogram the subconscious of people, how to motivate them without them necessarily knowing, right? People say Charlie Manson was a part of it. People say The Doors, Jim Morrison. People say a lot of the bands. What was it called again? The Laurel Canyon, right? Laurel Canyon. And believe it or not, Canada was a major MK Ultra experimentation ground, particularly Montreal, particularly the University McGill, where a lot of experiments were run. Apparently, that's what I'm told. Quebec was heavily used because it was what's the acid experiment sent on the French town called? I'm not sure. So Quebec was heavily used for this, right? That's why when you hear about like Harley Pasternak, remember him? He was the trainer, the personal trainer to Kanye. That would be an example of a current modern day handler, an MK Ultra type handler. But the brainwashing is much bigger, right, than just individuals and using. I saw yesterday Taylor Swift, for example. Taylor Swift now getting engaged in politics. It looks like she's going to be a MK Ultra asset. Jack Posobiec and a few others mentioning that she's been basically engaged to do this stuff. There was a leak the other day saying they met to talk about the future Biden administration, her, Jack Posobiec saying it's done. She's going to be an engaged agent. Now, she tried this before. She campaigned against the Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. Marsha Blackburn, by the way, who was trying to get the Epstein flight logs, right? So think about it like this. You had Taylor Swift after the race for the Tennessee senator. She's not even from Tennessee. She's from Pennsylvania. So she got herself involved in the 2018 midterms with the campaign and tried to stop Marsha Blackburn from getting elected. She won anyway, and now she's one of the leading people to get the Epstein flight logs as senator for Tennessee. So she's effective, right? She's definitely effective. But we've already seen her fail at a smaller scale thing in Nashville. So we'll see how she makes it. But remember that we know someone who has our number, and that's Kanye West. So what I do think is going to happen is they're going to engage her, right? But the specter will re-enter the system, which is her nemesis, which is her antidote, which is Kanye West. So it's going to be amazing to watch Kanye resurface in the next political debate in order to confront the Taylor Swift plant, the MK Ultra plant. So my prediction, she will be motivated, she will be engaged, but she will be neutralized by a much more powerful force. And Ye will make his triumphant return to American politics in order to steal her thunder once again, as he did years ago when he took the trophy out of her hands. So very funny stuff. So we also had, BlackRock was in the news because of the debates, I guess. Oh yeah, if you didn't see, there was the debates last night, Republican debates. Looks like, again, Trump won. Right, not participating. Trump won. There was a NBC News watch party with 30 Georgia voters. They did a straw poll of the 30 voters. The results were the following: the more powerful than the Swifties. Yeah, I think so. I think so. The Swifties are sort of. I mean, they're low IQ, I guess you could say. Right, so. They're effective, but it's a numbers thing. Kanye needs only to conjure up a few high impact people, and they can put an end to this pretty quickly, right? I think. I don't think she's going to be. I think she can move votes for sure. She's effective. I'm not denying she's effective. I just don't think she's that effective, right? So there you go. I don't think a Time magazine cover is going to cover it. You know what I mean? We need more. So the straw poll that NBC ran, and NBC obviously not credible. 18 of the 30 said Trump all the way. Not all of them would vote for Republican. So of that, there were only, I guess, 26 Republican voters in the end. And 18 of them went to Trump, 5 to Vivek, who won the debate, it looks like. So what did Vivek do to win the debate? It was hilarious. He he punched Nikki Haley in the face so hard that I don't think she's going to get up. And what he did was he said she can't even name 3 provinces that she wants to send American troops to die in to defend Ukraine. She can't name those. That's how little she gives a shit about actual Ukraine, right? And there was only so many people that could do that. I can't name 3 provinces in Ukraine. No way. I don't know any of them. Donetsk, I guess. I've heard that name a bunch. So he says, this is a woman who will send your kids to die so she can buy a bigger house. You should have seen her face, right? Just so angry, but she was never going to make it, right? But more importantly, I had one good joke for Chris Christie as well. He says to Chris Christie, do everybody a favor, walk off the stage, have a nice meal, and get out of the race. So very, very strong, very powerful, excellent work by him. But here's the more important thing, right? And this is what I think Vivek is really bringing to the race this time. So Benny Johnson says, Vivek Ramaswamy calls out all 3 candidates for turning on Trump after using him for money and endorsements, and then drops truth nukes. So he says J6 was an inside job. There's only him willing to say that. And it's pretty clear now. Like, I don't think there's any way anyone who's seen all of the video, the police moving the police moved the barricades when they were working. You understand that, right? From the video that we've seen, the barricades were working. People were not entering the Capitol until the police moved them. The policemen saying this is an inside job, they're setting up Trump. We've seen all that video. We've seen the protesters be respectful inside the space. You've seen the shaky camera stuff that they used in order to hide this stuff. We also saw, right, remember what Trump said to Kristen Welker a few months ago, that they destroyed all the evidence in the J6 stuff, and she laughed at him. But now we know it's true. They've destroyed all the evidence, because if you would go back and look at Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, you'd see just to what extent they're lying, because now we've seen more video, right? So that's why they have to destroy it. They're clearly lying on this, and that would be too much. So he does, J6 was an inside job. The 2020 election was stolen. So he's saying, he's the only candidate saying it publicly. And I think, again, right, as Bitcoiners, what do we think about the 2020 US election, right? Do we have any proof? No, but it's an Ethereum transaction. Do we need proof of every transaction on Ethereum being not credible, being made for the convenience of Wall Street, Silicon Valley rug pullers? No, we know. We know it's the engineering of the system. You don't need proof of any individual. You don't need to know what Vivek was or Vitalik is thinking, or you don't need to know any of that, right? All you need to know is the engineering choices that were made for all shitcoins compared to Bitcoin. And once you understand the engineering trade-offs, you understand that none of these networks have credibility. They are exactly what Bitcoiner maxis say they are. They are absolute pump and dump schemes in order to rob low IQ people of their money, right? That or high IQ people of their money. But it's to rob. So we don't need proof as Bitcoiners. We don't need proof. We understand the systems, right? We understand that the result wasn't credible. To what extent was it incredulous? I don't know. Joe Biden could have won. I don't know. But I don't believe any of the results. You understand? None of them. So there's a scenario where I'm not saying even that Joe Biden lost. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the election wasn't credible. We didn't have an election. We didn't have an election. We had something like an election, but it would be like saying to a Bitcoiner, someone transacted on another blockchain, right? And did the transaction really happen? Is it relevant to the future of the world? Is it a real transaction? Most Bitcoiners would say, well, someone sent a digital signal along the internet. I don't know if that's a valid transaction. It's certainly not a Bitcoin. So the idea being that the engineering of the election system is all you need to know. That's it. You don't need to know anything else, right? And I think the angle that Vivek is taking here is exactly correct. We don't need to know a specific example of cheating. Nothing like that. We just have to have a little bit of understanding of decentralized systems, shared databases, and what goes into them. And if you understand a little bit about what Bitcoin is a shared database, right? It's a shared database. If you understand the engineering of shared databases, the exact same engineering principles apply to election systems as they do to Bitcoin. The exact same. It's the same formula. So if you understand why you love Bitcoin versus shitcoins, it's very easy to understand that our election system is a shitcoin. It's not real. It's not real, right? Bitcoiners would understand that the surface area of attack, that's why Vivek is always saying, take a vacation day for elections, paper ballots, one-day voting, and it's done. That limits the surface of attack. That makes it less convenient to vote, but way more credible, which is all we should really be optimizing for, because we have no credibility, right? So he came in and said that. Then he says, the government lied about 9/11. And I love his wording of government lied about 9/11. I love it, because you don't want to go too far with the 9/11 thing, right? It was an inside job, probably too far. Maybe not in the future, but for now, I think you sound like you lack credibility if you go that way, right? But that they lied about it is a fact. It's a fact. There's no way they didn't lie about it. So he's on safe ground by saying that and attacking it that way. And he says, of course, the great replacement theory is not a conspiracy theory. So Kaneko the Great says here, Vivek Ramaswamy calls out Nikki Haley for not knowing the names of 3 provinces in eastern Ukraine. Haley responds with a blank stare. One thing that Joe Biden and Nikki Haley have in common is that neither of them could even state for you the 3 provinces in eastern Ukraine that they want to send our troops to actually fight for. She has no idea what the names of those provinces are, but she wants to send our sons, daughters, troops, and military equipment to fight. Look at the blank expression. She doesn't know the names of the provinces. Not many people could have pulled this kind of attack off, right? You need someone of Vivek's intellectual capacity, just raw brain power, right? Because he knew the 3 provinces, right? So not a lot of people could have done that. Trump couldn't have done that. Trump doesn't have that arsenal. That's an angle Trump doesn't have, right? Trump can't say, I know more details than you. Trump he could take care of Nikki Haley, no problem. He's got all the skills necessary. So that's fine. But there you go. So what we're seeing is the brainwashing capacity, both literally to engineer academia, to engineer political points of view on the media, all of those things changing, the actual assets that are engaged, the MK Ultra type assets that get engaged, also becoming more and more transparent. We see here someone mentioning that they must have some blackmail on Swift and Kelsey. Looks like it. Yeah, probably. Don't know exactly, but it looks like there's something like that going on. But here's the good news again, right? The ability, and I think that the counter that we've been dealing with about elections and 9/11 and January 6th and JFK and all of this stuff, right? The way this has been dealt with until now has been censorship, because the censorship thing forces everyone into a kind of doubtful position, doubtful footing. It allows a lot of doubt to creep in, and it has blunted our ability to speak openly about things. Because for a long time, you were called a conspiracy theorist. There was ways to blunt these forms of attack. There was basically ways to artificially maintain the fault tolerance of the fiat system, right? It kept it high because it was individuals. You were not able to form around a particular issue like JFK or like 9/11 or like January 6th or like the 2020 elections. It was very difficult to do that because censorship would just stop conversations in their tracks everywhere and things couldn't progress, right? So censorship was a major part of this whole scheme, right? Now and you can still see the censorship in all of its machinations. Just take Elon Musk since he bought X, right? Does anyone think that the actions against Elon Musk since he bought X have anything to do with his business, with his personality? Nothing, right? It's all censorship. So the minute he comes for that he buys X, the SEC sues Musk over the purchase. The FTC demands internal documents. Biden DOJ sues SpaceX for hiring refugees that don't work that aren't rocket scientists. The SEC opens investigations against Tesla over his literal glass house. You remember that? Criminal investigations over Tesla for the self-driving cars. They're into Neuralink, right? So the federal investigation into Neuralink. Tesla's been sued over harassment. Media campaign against X, the corporate boycott against X, right? So the censorship machine is just sputtering and stuttering and Elon, gotta get him, right? But now a whole new front has opened for the censorship industrial complex, and it's what I mentioned yesterday. It's again Daily Wire, Federalist Magazine, and the state of Texas yesterday suing the U.S. Secretary of State and the State Department over constitutional rights and the State Department's chilling effect for free speech. So amazingly, U.S. state, maybe the most important U.S. state, and these new media companies are coming after the federal government for censorship. Now, the reason why this is important is indeed, since Elon bought X, since Disney has all this financial trouble, since the brainwashers are losing capacity to keep the fault tolerance of the fiat system at the 90-something% that's required for consensus to move forward. Again, the fault tolerance of the US engineered system is well over 90%. If 90% of nodes, universities, businesses, all that stuff doesn't stay aligned. It comes down. It comes down, right? So here's what we know. Molly Hemingway, thrilled to announce we are suing the federal government for its work funding the infrastructure, development, and marketing and promotion of censorship technology and private censorship enterprises in order to unconstitutionally demonetize and suppress the Federalists. Colin Rugg writes, South Carolina State Treasurer Curtis Loftus has announced that South Carolina will be divesting from Disney after the company pulled ads on X. So Disney losing there, the state of Texas going against both the U.S. federal government, and it will go to things like Disney, right, for joining in this stuff. The Attorney General, the same one that the Bushes tried to railroad and impeach in Texas, who's now on a revenge tour, says the following. Today, I'm suing the U.S. State Department. I am proud to lead the fight to save Americans' constitutional rights from Joe Biden's tyrannical government. The State Department's mission to obliterate the First Amendment is completely un-American. This agency will not get away with their illegal campaign to silence citizens and publications they disagree with. I'm joined by Daily Wire and Federalist. So amazingly, right, this is all happening. It's all happening. And again, the fallout of this will be the deconstruction of the massive industrial brainwash system. Mike Benz calls it the he said he's going to release a book. Let me see what he has a title for it. It's actually really excellent. I'm pretty sure I copied it. Let's see what he says. Maybe I didn't. Let me get it out here. I got it. Got to get the old Mike Benz stuff going, you know? He's first up in my thing. This is what he calls it. Oh, yeah, here's what it is. He has a new book coming out called The Weapons of Mass Deletion instead of Weapons of Mass Destruction. The Weapons of Mass Deletion. So look, the fault tolerance of the brainwash system based on root key access to the U.S. average American's mind because of the mirage of the money system is falling apart before our eyes. JP Morgan can't keep it together. It's all based on Joe Biden keeping it together, which would be like Craig Wright being in charge of your protocol. It ain't gonna work. We have the Craig Wright of presidents, the actual Craig Wright of presidents. And so this shitcoin ain't going to pump. The US dollar is going to lose its ability to enchant, spellbind, and obliterate the minds of Americans. So we're winning this year, 2024, guys. What did I tell you in the dark days? What did I tell you? 2024, the greatest year for Bitcoin ever. It's going to be fun. So there you go. That's what we got. 32 likes. We got to get it up. More likes, more winning. We're going to win with them. Remember, I used to love those. Remember Trump's old stock speech? I don't know if you guys were around for it in 2016. We're going to win with the military. We're going to win with farmers. We're going to win. You're going to say, Mr. President, I can't keep winning. I can't keep winning. We're going to win more. When I lived in New York in the early CoinDesk days, that was sort of anyone who had Trump derangement syndrome back then, I would just repeat that line to them, we're going to win. It was good times. Before the brainwash, this is one of the reasons why I hate the brainwashers so much. So I made a prediction right after Trump won that in the end, he would win over most Americans and that there would be a major turning towards him and that people would love him once they saw him practice the job. Of course, that didn't come true. And it was the brainwashers who made sure it didn't, because I can still remember in the summer of 2017 in New York City, markets going crazy. Everyone's happy. The market's going crazy, so everyone's happy, right? We're all making money. We're all sitting around. CoinDesk is still really small. We're not 10 people in total, right? We've just doubled from the last year, but we're still a very small organization. And we're all in one office in New York City. We're all sharing one office. We're all like corners of a table type of thing. And you couldn't go on your own or anything like that. You were just stuck in one room. And it was about half Trump, not Trump supporters in the office, right? But I was able to get it to a point where we could have civil conversations, and even the half that was anti-Trump was coming along to the memes and the jokes, because we were playing, like, there was like a soundtrack of stuff I would play all that time. Remember Trump, billions and billions and billions and billions. There was a song, billions and billions, and there was that one. Then there was, I wouldn't go to France. Remember he said that in a speech. I wouldn't go to France because France isn't France. So someone like remixed all these things, and we would put like these soundtracks on. And it got to a point where it was fun. Like, even the people who didn't agree with Trump were like, well, he's, I don't agree with him, but he's not Hitler. We got it to there, right? That summer of 2017 was a sign of where America was headed had the brainwashers not got involved. Now, that all went to shit in Charlottesville. That fucking scam op, right? Now we know it's an op. At the time, we didn't know, right? The Tiki Torch, very fine people scam. Of course, Trump never said that there were very fine Nazis there, right? Imagine that they got a scam where they got half the American population to believe that a sitting U.S. president called Nazis fine people. That's how good the brainwashing was at one point. And you couldn't talk about Trump anymore in the office after that. That's how important that scam and op was. The joke sort of left the room at that time, right? You couldn't even play around. And I didn't know it was an op at the time. I knew that the lying about what he said was an op. That became clear right away. But after we saw Patriot Front and all these other ops, it became so clear that Charlottesville was a scam from the beginning, that even the paid people were scam. They're not real, right? So they did a lot of damage with that one. So yeah. Donald Trump, written in 2015, Mac Miller. Yeah, I think he died, right? He was like a rapper, and then, am I correct about that? And it was that people would love him one day because he was great, if I remember. I don't remember exactly. All right. Anything is better than the relentless diet of demoralization. Yeah, that's the demoralization thing is really terrible. It's that, to me, that's what some of this straight up lying in front of your face is about. It's to sort of, make you smell your own shit. But we don't have to bother. We love life, right? And we're winning. So fuck them. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. A special Friday edition. All right, team. Peace.